But to give you an idea, we have Australia, so they're on the beer. We have Japan, we have Finland, we have Denmark, we have Italy, we have France, and obviously I've left the best to last because our presenter has got up at the crack of dawn, it's not even dawn yet, for our presentation today. So thank you very much. So the next bit, just a bit of housekeeping, that is what I am eating. I made enough that could be divided into two for everybody to eat one today. So if you haven't got one, I'm generously handing it over to you, okay, in a virtual cafe sense. The usual housekeeping, and for those of you that are familiar with us, you might be able to have a week's news for 2 minutes. Please do make sure that you've got your phones muted or emails muted, particularly if you're presenting or you're going to be asking a question, because nothing worse than hearing ping, 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 ping. It's about sharing ideas, and it's also about thinking positively, because this is what we're about. Introduce yourself in the chat box if you just joined us. I was saying to do that earlier on, and use that opportunity to network and speak to other people. The practicalities of Zoom, I'm sure you're all hunky-dory with it now, but just to make sure, please do keep mute, but do keep your video on, because it's nice to be able to see some friendly faces for all of us that are on the other end. Use the chat box. We are recording it, and it will be available on YouTube. We were onto a waiting list, so there are people that would love to have been here, so they're going to catch up on YouTube. Feel free to play around with your gallery view on your right-hand side as well, so you can see more people, because it's nice sometimes to put faces to names. You also can use a thumbs up and a chat box so you can interact with people. So if you really like something that Dwight says later on, put the thumbs up or give him a wee clap. And finally, if you didn't know, if you want to unmute yourself, you can use the space bar. You don't have to rely on your mouse to do that. So just a quick thing from Scotland that I wanted to highlight. Jenny gets random emails, and some of them were recently about how much we're spending in Scotland on COVID, providing support to our vulnerable people. And I saw a sight of the contract. Now, this is what my dad, who lives in a semi-rural area, I see Japan jumping up and down, my dad in a rural area gets in a box once a week, and the Scottish government are paying this. Now, the contract for 60,000 people is £68.4 million, and I'm pretty impressed because we've got Heinz baked beans and things here and Scottish Baxter soup. That is a total of £1,140 that we are spending over a 4-month duration to provide food to our vulnerable people that can't get out in COVID. Now, that brings it down to a weekly cost of £71. And the question I have is, if we can funnily find £68.4 million to provide vulnerable people with essential food, and it costs £71, could we do this going forward for transport in any of our countries for £71? So that's just a food for thought to kick us off. But the next thing is a bit of a drum roll here. I've been working behind the scenes, and we now have our own website. So we have ruralmobility.scot that's available. So feel free, it's going to be evolving. Feel free to suggest things that need to be added to it, that you want changed. It's our website, and we will do our best to make sure that it reflects what we're talking about and what we're doing. So I had to do a bit of a cheesy drum roll because it's been quite a lot of hard work. But in the meantime, I'm going to hand you now over to Dwight. Dwight, people have heard me talk about for probably about the last 3 years. So I have to say, Dwight, the advantage of COVID for me is that we can actually bring you in to do a cafe, and you can share your experiences. I think you will all find it really interesting. If you miss anything, you can go back and look at it on YouTube, and I'm sure Dwight will also give you his contact details. But I am immensely grateful for him, Cheryl, Carol, and all of you getting up early to come and be part of today. And I'm now going to share my screen, stop sharing it, and let Dwight take over. And he'll be about 20 minutes, and then we'll do some chatting. So Dwight.
Hey, let me get that going. Okay, is everybody looking at my first slide?
Yep, cracking.
Okay, wonderful. First, it's a great pleasure to be with you today. I guess I met Jenny virtually at 3 years ago. And we would be in communication about many different things. And we had a transportation camp here in Ithaca, New York, and Jenny beamed in, and people enjoyed very much the novelty of a international presence in what otherwise would be a smaller meeting up at Cornell University. So it's really wonderful being here. So let me start. Tompkins County, New York has a population of 102,500 people. And we have a small urban area. Small urban area means a population of over 50,000. Our population is 54,000. And it's right in the dead center of our county. And we're surrounded by rural towns. And we're surrounded by 7 mostly rural counties. And much like the picture to the right. And we have about 16,000 people commute into our county to work daily. And about 5,000 people from our county commute outside of Tompkins County to work. And our county is has fared much better than our surrounding areas in terms of we are a regional economic growth center. Our what underpins our economy is higher education. Cornell University is here. Ithaca College is here. Together, about 24% of our population are college students. We have manufacturing, agriculture, tourism, and services, and government, actually. And so I work for the county. I've always worked for the county. I've been a transit planner, a transit manager, a transit service development manager, and in my present capacity, I'm working from the Department of Social Services. Our public transportation planning unit in the county is in the Department of Social Services, and I'm a mobility manager and a grant manager. So we are very happy today because we were just awarded like $10 million in funding relative to extra federal funding for the COVID-19 situation. So with that as background, let me kick off. Mobility as a service. Multimodal trip planning, customer service, and integrated delivery of services to meet customer needs. Why Tompkins County? I mean, I won't say we're in the middle of nowhere, but one of our slogans is that Ithaca is 10 square miles surrounded by reality, and so why are we doing it? First, this idea that I'm going to present to you, the basic concept, I first presented 10 years ago today. We have extensive mobility management programs which are, I don't know if you use the term, but we really are quite well organized to have a community mobility education program about all of the options. We also help create and support a broad spectrum of shared ride and shared use services that quite a lot of other people don't have. We have a very strong nonprofit sector, and that gives us continuity and sustainability. And we have a collaborative culture, and this is really important because we are first and foremost an academic-based community. Collaboration is a very natural event. We do not have a lot of the type of political competition and infighting, at least visible, that larger urban areas have, or some of our neighboring rural counties have. So I first want to just talk about the whole general concept of what we were trying to do, and then I will discuss how we have broken out into 2 phases, and we are working on phase 1 now, actually beginning later in the summer. So let's start. Mobility information. It is more than just the app. We have a very effective community mobility education program, which is operated by an agency whose mission is to do consumer-oriented programming about virtually everything of home economics, energy, and now mobility. And I'll show you examples of that later. But clearly, MaaS also needs multimodal trip planning by app and the phone. We anticipate that when we get going, that half of the multimodal trip planning will be by app, and half of the people will be calling to talk with a human being about planning their trip. Financial services will be a very important key, and this is one of the idea for a annual mobility plan and budget for customers with monthly budget billing. That idea came to me 10 years ago. And budget billing is what we use for balancing out energy expenditures, so that the electric company will take 1 year worth of your energy costs divided by 12 and give you a level monthly bill. It levels out. Otherwise, it will be very wide swings between summer and winter. And that's something that we really thought about applying for mobility plans. We need to be able to make third-party payments to operators. We really need to be able to have public agencies, such as Department of Social Services, which purchases a lot of travel for clients, to have a much more up-to-date, innovative way of doing that. And we also need a way to credit revenue to participants who operate in the capacity as a volunteer driver, or their employer subsidizes the costs. Customer services. This is something that I always emphasize straight up. First, people need access to information 24/7. Well, how the heck do you do that in a small urban rural area? But fortunately, we have 2 agencies that operate on 24/7. So it is possible to do. We need a guaranteed ride program. the guaranteed ride program would operate to rescue people when they screw up, when they have trip failure, when they have missed the last bus, when their ride does not come, when they have a flat tire on their bike in the middle of the beautiful rural countryside. All of the circumstances that people have that they need help, that is what the Guaranteed Ride program does, and that would be a part of a membership-based package. We want to provide customer feedback to the mobility operators, and we also want to have an opportunity to come up with co-marketing with local businesses and offer people discounts. Everybody likes to have, 10% off on your vegetables or ice cream cones or bike repair or so on and so forth. And innovation, increasing the supply of services. So I've taken a lot of time with this slide. This is the only slide I'm going to be doing that. But I wanted to just really show that we have this balanced approach. It's very customer-oriented, customer-centric approach, and that's how we talk about MaaS. So our phase one has three components, and one's the multimodal trip planning, rural services, and multimodal customer service. I have one of my favorite presidents from 117 years ago was Theodore Roosevelt, and he always had very pithy sayings, and this is what I repeat to people, because when you're taking, quote, a big idea, and now you're trying to really implement it, and now you're trying to really break it down and plan out what you're actually doing, we do what we can with what we have, where we are, and that's what our unofficial motto is. Multimodal trip planning. We have bus services, we have shared use services, and we are limited in terms of who has data on APIs that apps can use to be integrated. We are very fortunate that our public transit system, which is called TCAT, it does have the APIs, quite a few apps use it, and this is just a screenshot of where all the TCAT buses were coming into the downtown. We also have shared use services. We have the oldest, largest nonprofit community car share program in New York State. It's 12 years old. It's Ithaca Car Share. They have 27 or 28 cars and one pickup truck, which is the most popular vehicle for people on the weekend. So looking at regionally, we have 3 other counties have bus service to Tompkins County, and TCAT is in the middle. But there's only 2 of them, TCAT being one, that has real-time bus locations from apps. So if we look at our downtown, what could we have as a how can we do multimodal trips? And the first is that one commuter app, the little red bus. At the same time, those are the TCAT buses to the right that are coming in. At the same time, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 cars in the same area of the downtown, and we have 50, 60, 100 bikes. So this is these are the building blocks that we are working with how to do multi-modal things. So, increasing supply of rural mobility services. TCAT has a pilot that was to be launched in April. It's been postponed to August, which is a first mile, last mile service, which basically enables people in a surrounding a bus route to be picked up by a small bus and make connections to the regular transit bus. And that's what we are ready to launch. We have an app, and we have our mobility management program, which is doing public outreach surveys, rider education, and feedback on the service. So we're all ready to launch, and if or when this works, and we find different models and different ways we could use volunteer drivers or other models of a volunteer transportation program, we really want to expand the range and access to the fixed six-route bus service in the rural areas. So this is a rural village of approximately 2,000 people live in this map shop. So we have 9 volunteer transportation services. And they were very much set up to operate based on a 20th century model of a lot of paper, maybe a spreadsheet. And we're really looking to, and we just were discussing this in a meeting last week about taking the next step and centralizing and consolidating the trip planning, the driver dispatch as a service, so that the volunteer transportation services can function better. So how does this work? Mostly people are volunteer drivers. They're driving their own cars, and they're being reimbursed for mileage for the service that they provide. We also have rideshare or carpooling, and we have switched different services that provides rideshare matching, and it's just really important to be very agile and be flexible and really dealing with change, because change is always going to happen. Customer service. This is my favorite topic. This is my first question when I'm at a conference, and there's a MaaS panel up on the stage, and I ask about customer service, and normally there's a blank stare, or this is something for the future. Well, I very much completely believe that this is something you have to start out with. So, our mobility management program that does the public mobility education program is called Way to Go. If you Google waytogo.org or Way to Go Tompkins, it'll take you to the website, and they do everything for contracting with an information service called 211, which is the phone number, which is a 24/7 service, so people can call and find out information about services not only for transportation, but public services and nonprofit agency services and everything that we have in our community. And these are all, they're all videos, very short education videos that are up on the website. A lot of information is up on their website, and they are also, they're in Spanish and Chinese because those are two non-English language populations that we have in our community, which are large. So that's mobility education. But we need, and we have not yet formalized this. This is part of phase 1 of setting up a 24/7 customer service center that is, it may operate virtually with a contracting with Ithaca Car Share and 211 information and referral, because they are both 24/7 operations. And I discussed before our enhanced guaranteed ride membership program. I'll just give one example that happened not very long ago, a couple years ago, where an older woman needed to go to the doctor in Ithaca. She came from about 40 kilometers away from Ithaca, and she used a state and federal funded aid taxi service to come to the doctor. Okay. So what happened was that she was only coming to the doctor for 30 minutes. And when she came out, and the taxi said they will wait for her. When she came out, the taxi was gone. And every time she called the taxi for once an hour for the next 4 hours, she was told the taxi was on the way, and the taxi never came. And she was there when the doctor's office was closing, and she had no way to get home. And she was extraordinarily upset. And one of the other patients asked her, well, where does she live? And that's 40 kilometers away, and took her home. Okay. This was a failure in terms of the level of service that the taxi operator provided, that we in the nonprofit mobility sector would never envision doing to somebody. Like, we do not do that. So we set up a program, and we notified all of the physicians immediately that if anything like this ever happens, they are to call the Ithaca Car Share number, and we will get a volunteer driver and take people where they need to go. But you cannot have failure. And it's so important to provide a decent level of customer service. And it's something that in a small community we value, we need to do, and we will do. So phase 2 is exciting. So this is a collection of all of our mobility services in our community. And 10 years ago, plus a couple weeks, I had the idea of what if we presented everything as a menu and work with people to select an estimated cost for an annual plan of services. I'm just showing one page that would have been like 1 page out of 5 of types of services that could be used. And it very well can also cover things that traditionally we would not normally cover, but enabling people to purchase a bike, to rent a car from a car rental agency. So working through and working with people, we came up with some prototypical sample budgets. Okay, the first is a small city household, 1 car, 2 adults, 1 youth. There's a website called Walk Score, which basically scores from 0 to 100 the ability to walk to a lot of places that people would need to walk to, is what you find in a denser environment. So this is a sample annual budget broken out with a monthly payment. We have one number here is for member support, which is basically our extra revenue to run the MaaS Center. And that number is calculated by adding up all of the other options in the in a budget and adding 10%. So it's not 10% of the total, it's 10% of the choices which people are combining in their mobility budget. And so, monthly payment of $163. And I just lost some light, that's why. Maybe that will help. Okay, interesting. Rural household. 1 car, 2 adults, 1 child, walk score 0. This is really living where you can't walk anywhere that you need to get to. I also set this up with the idea that this is a lower income household which qualify for additional support either from an agency or an employer. So they have 1 car and 2 adults. And typically the car is an older car with a lot of miles and not a lot of years left. So here in their budget, they have one of the adults is going to be commuting to work in a small city, and they have a van pool membership. They also have a car share have a car share membership. Now the car share is not out in the rural area. People use it, but you have to go into the small urban area to get a car. It's a discounted plan because of their income. Our Ithaca Car Share program has an easy access program for people who earn less than 150% of the federal poverty level. And believe me, I know this is all American stuff, but we do have a very regular way of qualifying people for additional support, be it from the nonprofit sector or be it from the public sector. So why do people need a car share plan? Well, they need a car share plan if you come in to work with a van pool and you need to run some errands before going home or at lunch or at some other time of day. It's good to be able to grab a car to go and do that. And that's why they have a car share plan. There's a taxi here because there are times in which the taxi is going to have to work. Guaranteed ride is here because that's what the payment is. There's member support, which is what I discussed earlier. But here, too, there's a volunteer driver revenue. Well, what is this about? This is about if the adult who is not working uses their car to take a neighbor of theirs for 17 trips during the year to go into the small city to go to medical service or some other qualifying public service, and they would be eligible to get a mileage reimbursement. So $400 turns out to be 17 round trips. What's important here is that that revenue could either be paid directly to them with a check, or it could be applied to their family mobility budget. The van pool program subsidy is from the employer at $50 per month. So when all said and done, their total payment is $111 per month. I had fun coming up with this slide because I was thinking about, we have two phases. We're funded through to do phase one. We will be creating an app that is targeted to what we have available as our services. And we know exactly what we want the app to do. And I'm very confident we will be able to organize our customer service center. And I'm very confident that we will organize a membership-based guaranteed ride program. So I assign that a pretty low risk. And that's really a building block for phase two. So phase two is the bundled subscription annual services broken out to monthly payments. Phase two right now, it's a pretty high risk because we have many unknowns. And this is the difference of working in theory and taking a good idea and seeing how practical it's actually going to be. What are all of the secure and risk mitigation measures we need to have relating to financial policies and operations to be sustainable and secure? And we're going to need assistance to go and do that. We are fortunate that we do have an opportunity for partnership with a larger nonprofit that is developing a next generation of a individual mobility account system that could be with the intent of deploying that nationally, and that would definitely enable a mobility as a service to that function. So this is our team, all of our logos. My associate is Wenjung Lee, a PhD student from Cornell, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Fabulous. Thank you, Dwight. I'm conscious that I gave you 20 minutes and we went over, but I think it's really important to go over because there's a lot of meat in this, and I can see in the chat there's lots going on there. So I'm going to hand over to Ali just now, who has been looking at the chat, and he's going to pick up on some of the questions. Ali.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Morning all, and thanks to Dwight. Great to get a bit more detail on that. We have heard bits and pieces through Jenny over the last couple of years, as Jenny mentioned. It's great to get a bit more detail. So I'm, for those who don't know me, I'm Ali McInroy, wearing my MaaS Scotland hat today. I'll do the moderation of the questions, of which we had loads, so thank you very much for putting those in. I'll take them in roughly the order they came in. I'll do my best bartender impersonation, try and remember who came in what order. If we don't get through them all, I'm sure we can take a snapshot of the questions and share them with Dwight, and we'll get an answer to you one way or another as part of that. So, first question actually came from yourself, Rob. You were keen to talk about business models. Do you want to expand on that?
We have, oh, sorry. Do you want me to answer?
Well, I don't know if Rob wants to expand a little bit on the question.
Hey, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, good morning, Dwight, and thank you very much. Really interesting presentation. It's great to see MaaS, Mobility as a Service, working. You started to go through the figures and stuff, but I'm very interested in the business model and how this this works. And do you as a local authority have to subsidise this, or is it self-funding through the money that people put into the scheme?
Well, we are starting phase 1 with a federal subsidy. We competed nationally we asked for $820,000 for 2 years for a pilot, for a development and a pilot. It's very much of a research program from the point of view of the feds. For us, we're actually developing phase 1 and we'll deploy it. Phase 1 is very comfortable for us in terms of financially making that work. What we do want to have is the guaranteed ride program. We want that to be sustainable economically. Think of it as insurance that people have when you have a car. And here in the United States, we have the American Automobile Association. In Canada, it's CAA. In Great Britain, I think it's like 3 different organizations that one can join, that when you have a flat tire, when you run out of gas, when things go wrong, they don't come and blame you for screwing up, they come and help you. Yeah. And we want to apply that to everything else. And there's going to be a big demand for it, but it'll be a very sustained demand. And one thing I've learned in social services is that there's a percentage of the population who have a very difficult time in daily life in this world. And they'll end up being very, some of our best customers, okay? But we are going to increase the level of service so people have the mobility access, and they can recover from when they have either an operator or they have made a mistake. Phase 2, does it need to be subsidized? I'm not afraid of public subsidy. I'm not afraid of, if we are saving public agencies a lot of overhead, because now they're using paper to pay for every single trip that they are performing. We set up a much more of an automated system for the payment to happen, for them to be paying a fee to support the overhead of a newer, faster, more efficient, labor-saving way of paying for trips. So that's part of it. In terms of our business case, we've used what's known as a business model canvas, and we have business models for both phase 1 and partly for phase 2. It's much more vague because we don't have that solution for doing the managing the bundled, the annual mobility budgets and multi-payments. That we do not have worked out yet, but we are hopeful that we will end up having it.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thank you. I suspect that business models and things would be something we could almost devote an entire session to. So we'll move on to any number of different topics that people would like to cover on this. So we'll come to Katrina Haston, I believe, is in sunny Ayrshire, who was interested in the first mile, last mile provision, but had some reservations to do with her own CT legislation. Katrina, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I run a community transport organisation down here, and we run mostly under what's called Permit 19 legislation. Now, it's quite strict, and it depends also on the size of the vehicle that you use. But I saw you had a minibus going around collecting up people and taking them towards the main bus services. But minibuses in this country under Permit 19 legislation can only be hired out by community organisations. We can't be hired out by individuals. It's slightly different if you're using a vehicle that's 10 seats or less, but then you have to charge a fare on the spot, that sort of thing. So I think there might be some legislative hurdles to be got over if we move towards this level of integration in MaaS in Britain.
Well, let me just say that the agency with the smaller buses is we have one, it was set up to be the consolidated nonprofit transportation corporation, actually, for this demand response and paratransit service. They already have a contract with the transit system to operate what's known as the Americans with Disabilities Act paratransit service. So people by nature of a disability who cannot use the regular transit bus, the transit agency needs to provide this corridor regional coverage to enable people to have the same access that they would otherwise have with a transit bus. So we don't have this, we have a different regulatory framework that maybe is much more flexible than what you may have. So all I could say is good luck. The other thing I'd say too is that because it's a federal civil rights and has been that this law, Americans with Disabilities Act, has been in force since I believe 1993, is that all of our transit buses, all of the smaller vehicles that we have, they're all wheelchair accessible, and that is why we are using it.
Thanks, Dwight. I'm going to, we are rapidly running out of time. There are lots of questions, so we'll rush on at a pace. The next question, I think, is from Kenny, and it's very relevant, obviously, to Scotland because it relates to tourism and its impact and support through MaaS. So, Kenny, can I pass on to you?
Yeah, I was just looking at, thanks Dwight, that was really interesting. The area that I'm involved in a lot of rural Scotland around us is, yes, there's a lot of resident need, but there's also tourism need, and it's how you balance systems that service both. But I got the impression that maybe your area doesn't really have that tourism, but maybe I missed that. So that was one question of whether you do marry those both. And I suppose an additional question, just while I've got the mic, is just if you saw any jobs come through the system and whether you had an argument that helped your funding bids to the federal, etc., around job creation linked to this kind of innovative transport.
We are very much oriented about helping people use transit and shared ride and everything that we did before COVID-19. Now we have COVID-19, and probably until we all get a shot, that is going to be a more difficult sell, moving into having people share rides. But that type of efficiency and access was something that we have done, and our transit system is very successful at it normally. So I just blanked on your first part. If you give me 2 words, I'll answer it.
If you've got tourism there that you need to service.
Tourism, okay. Most of our tourists come here driving. And we have a lot of tourists from Canada, actually. And I'll end up sharing a link to a 2-minute video, a drone video that I think you'll find interesting to see why people want to come here.
I'm going to jump in there because I'm going to spin us over to the other side of the pond, which is Japan. because as you can see, we've got a fantastic question and comment. And if you want to leave, by all means, feel free to do so, people, because I know we're getting towards the hour limit, but there's lots of questions here. So if Dwight's all right to keep going, then we'll keep going through it. Because in Cafe Spirit, if you need another cup of tea or need to go to the toilet, go, please do. But I'm going to ask our Japanese friends to actually just make a comment about tourism and MaaS. Is he there still, or is he jumping up and down? Because he was jumping up and down earlier on, trying to get my attention.
Let me talk. Hi, well, hi all. I'm Israel, and I'm calling here from Tokyo, which is not precisely a rural area, but well, I was by the way, Dwight, very interesting presentation and very instructive. And well, I just made a comment about tourism because here in Japan, so the Japanese government is heavily developing the legal framework as well as developing a lot of initiatives to support MaaS in rural areas. It's actually like where they're starting. And I just mentioned tourism because the thing is that, so the first thing is in Japan, public transport authorities, they do not exist. The concept of public transport authority do not exist at all. They're all private companies or publicly private companies. And the thing is that even though they want to develop a mobility service in rural areas for to support the local communities, and also for something that in some places in Western Europe it happens, but not somewhere else, which is the population. So as you may know, Japan is losing population, so they want to focus on that. Even though the key point of MaaS is to provide that support, they are using tourism as a way to, one, revitalize the economies of the local regions, because it's one of the only activities you can bring from. And second is that even if those schemes are obviously highly dependent on subsidies and highly dependent on public initiatives, it is a very good way to, well, to reduce the burden for the public authority. So I would say that right now they are heavily focusing on that. Also, when we talk about Japan, so actually the working group is still currently working on that. But last year, what they did in the ministry is that they divide the country in 5 types of regions, and for rural areas there are like 2 types. Well, actually there are 3. One is a depopulating area, which is a legally established term, which basically means a town that is losing population and has certain characteristics. One is a touristic area, which doesn't need to be rural areas, but is normally far away. And the objective of these 2 are completely different, because in one, for example, they focus about reducing car usage, because many people need to go by car there, whereas the other ones, they focus on providing sustainable transportation, providing adaptive transportation. So I think this combination at some point is together, at some point is separate, but in both ways they more or less work very well in that. So it could be, I mean, it could be very good to have insights from you maybe about this like role of tourism into these kind of MaaS schemes.
We had a delegation came and visited us expressly from Japan, from the Japan Research Institute and the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism. They came and visited us. I sent them all the information that I had, so maybe they wouldn't come because it's December and we were having snowstorms, but they came anyway and they survived the snowstorm. They came to Columbus, Ohio, Ithaca, New York, and Washington, D.C., and then flew home. It was very, very interesting. And all of the points that you discussed, they outlined to us, especially with the very competitive private companies that have more of a vertical integration of their mobility services, servicing all the major metro areas, and the rural and the small urban rural parts of the country are left to fend. I won't quite say fend for themselves, but there was not a organizational structure that was apparent, and that's why they wanted to come and talk with us. We had a very good meeting, very interesting time, and there's an incredible amount of opportunity for tourism. It would be, and most of their tourists end up coming by car after maybe taking a train and then getting a rental and then trying to drive around. And you can imagine, depending on one's fluency in Japanese, that could be pretty difficult. So they had challenges and they wanted to come here, and we showed them around. We showed them the frozen waterfalls. We have like 137 waterfalls in our county. But it was very, very interesting. And I understand that when you have a lot of people traveling, it makes so much sense for there to be much more of an integration of moving people in a friendly way. And I pretty much thought that European countries that have a tremendous amount of tourism have had that type of service figured out.
Right,
lot
Dwight,
of buses.
I'm going to jump in, Dwight, because I know some people are going to have to leave shortly, and I'm trying to get through some of these questions, but I'm sorry. We may have to do a second session of Dwight. I can see this happening.
We are good.
I'm going to roll in Michael's question with Cheryl, who's up as well from America, because Michael's asking about volunteer driving, and Cheryl's sort of got the American spin on what's allowed to happen there. So do you three of you want to just quickly answer that sort of question for me? Michael.
Thank you, and thank you, Dwight. Very briefly, I'm aware that in Scotland, any sort of driving for reward is very heavily regulated, and certainly rural taxi services are suffering because of that. My question is, are transport, for your volunteer drivers, what measures are in place to ensure the vehicle is safe, the driving is safe, and the passenger is safe in terms of safeguarding and being assured that there'll be no risk to them personally as they travel?
All of the volunteer transportation companies are not necessarily companies. Some are just community members create this network to provide mutual aid and support. First, they are not regulated because they have their compensation is based on a federal reimbursement mileage rate or less than that, and that is not that's not considered paid driving compensation. They are volunteering their time and so forth. In terms of how insurance works, the insurance follows the is initially paid for by the owner of the car, and the organizations have an umbrella policy above and beyond all of what their their drivers programs are. Cheryl, do you want to comment about any of this?
I think generally there's
Cheryl, do you want to just introduce yourself, because some people haven't heard you speak before?
Yes. I work at the Community Transportation Association of America at this federally funded project called the National Center for Applied Transit Technology, NCAT. I've known Dwight and Carol for a long time. So anyway, in terms of volunteer, usually there's a check of the person to make sure that there's nothing bad in their driving record, their criminal background history is clear, and then they're pretty much free to go. I don't think most do any specific vehicle checks.
Right.
And volunteer organizations here have a really good safety record. So I don't think there's been a lot of controversy about that.
I'm going to quickly change the subject slightly to something that underpins everything that's happening today, and that's the digital connectivity. So I'm going to go to Italy in a minute. What you don't know is I had a complete electricity outage beforehand, so I was starting to panic that none of this was going to happen because I wasn't going to be here. So the guys are going to have to roll it out. But if we don't have electricity and we don't have internet, how does quite a lot of this happen? So Lucia, if you're still there in Italy, would you like to ask the question that you so bravely put forward?
Hi, Jenny. Thank you very much. I'm Lucia Chris. I'm living and working from a lovely place in Italy, and I live in a rural area, which is sometimes, you know, transport planners are making, let's say, lots of plans for transport, but they're living in different areas than those ones that they are planning for. So I think it's very important to know, like, I liked your quote, Dwight, know. Now, in my research, I saw that it is always an important aspect that if you address, you know, you plan a service and is based on an internet connection, a very good internet connection, or a digital, knowledge, you know how to use the internet based services, you know, then the answer is good. In rural areas in Europe, the internet connection is not very good sometimes, you know, in certain areas. And if you add the, let's say, the digital proficiencies, especially in a rural area, because of the depopulation, like somebody else mentioned earlier, you know, in rural areas usually live old people, you know, with, let's say, less access or less knowledge of using, let's say, applications or digital fancy stuff, you know. They may have a barrier in asking or using different mobility services. So what is your experience, especially in MaaS? Thank you for this. It was a very lovely presentation, by the way. Thank you, Jenny, for this. Thank you.
No worries.
We all have internet issues, rural areas, that some of the rural areas we have, not only internet issues, it's cell phone issues. There are places that are dead spots, some hills and valleys and so forth. That is why we very much anticipate like 50% of our interactions with customers will be by phone. And it may not be cell phone.
Sorry.
But one thing we also did too is our public transit system buses all have cellular Wi-Fi installed in the buses. And so especially young people are very happy when they get on the bus and they have like 20, 30 minutes to go, and now they can just turn on their screen and enjoy life. But really, you know, broadband internet is a challenge in our country that's still a ways from being resolved.
Yeah, I think we're all in the same boat, and I think all these projects, opportunities of getting 100% of people with digital connectivity that we have in the UK is a far-flung challenge. But it actually ties quite neatly in with the question that Anne, who's left us at the moment, from Denmark, asked the question, and I know the answer, but I'll ask it for the others. She'd like to know if you did some user groups to discuss how you actually got over the potential barriers and how you actually put the apps, etc., together. She says, I will be using the replay to listen to the answer. So I'll take note and tell her it was 10 past the hour that we asked the question. So she's just wanted to know more about your user group discussions.
The answer to that is yes.
Would you like to expand just briefly?
you have to have a very good engagement process. We have had focus groups. We have had surveys and engagement with customers, especially on the first mile, last mile program, which is a pilot, which is a completely new idea. That's why we have our very experienced way to go team in charge of that engagement and education and information, and it's a continuous process during the pilot. In terms of MaaS, we've had, for the last 10 years, people here have heard me talk about it a lot. And when we have, and we piggyback on other people's public events and meetings and so on and so forth, it gets very good reception, especially about the guaranteed ride program. That this is something that's saying, well, I don't know about anything else, but I'm very interested in that. How much would that cost me or my family to have? And so you have to be, if you're going to be focused on customer service, you have to be focused on customers and getting their input and finding really good ways to engage with them.
If those of you that don't know me, I'm all about the customer, and this is all about being a bottom-up approach. And I think this is where Dwight and I get on so fantastically well, because we put the customer at the center. I just wish we had the flexibility in our system to be able to implement some of your things. I'd love the guaranteed ride, so that if I missed the bus coming home because the train was late, that it was there. And I see a few people smirking at that. And also, I love the story that Dwight told me about when he was, I think you were in New York, correct me if I'm wrong, earlier in the year, and you were trying to get back to the airport and you couldn't find the information that you needed, and you couldn't believe there wasn't a 24/7 telephone line to ring.
That was Dallas.
Dallas, sorry.
Dallas, Texas, 7 million people, okay? And you're supposed to, conflicting information between the app and their website. I said, we'll call them. We call the number, we get a recording of, it's Monday through Friday for the phone call. I was like, what is that? So we got an Uber.
I asked the same question recently, and I think Azul was on the call with me about 24/7, and then like going, well, no, it's 9 to 5. We don't all travel 9 to 5, particularly in rural areas. I could go on about this for ages, but Rennie has asked me a question, which is quite an interesting one. She's wondering if your users have changed, because she says, I just wondered if switching from traditional services to MaaS changes the type of people that uses it.
I hope so. I really hope we end up making it so much easier for people who have access to the information that they need, to have the ease of use for scheduling rides. And that's just taking MaaS as a umbrella to pull together and to integrate how these various services work. And that's why we have a lot of interest in our mobility as a service team to be working together and so forth. As I said, collaboration is normal for us. When I go to other places in the state, when we talk about this and what we've been able to do, they look at us like, like, well, we can't do that here or whatever. And it's you know, what is the attitude and perspective you are bringing to the development?
Well, that ties neatly in with my Japanese friend, who is bouncing up and down again to ask the last question before we conclude, because I think it's a very apt question. Go on. Azul?
Okay, thank you for the anonymity. Yeah, so I have a question actually. So just a little bit out of it. I assume that many service providers, technology companies, service providers, public authorities, etc., they have approached to you and they perhaps they got a new idea,
Yes.
something that will make better your scheme and so on. So I just wondering from your perspective, one, what is that thing that you want that no one is offering? Second, what is that thing that you don't want and everyone is offering?
Everybody is offering multimodal payment systems because that is where the money is, literally. And that is where the private companies are going to earn money because they're going to get a percentage of all the payments. That is not our number one priority. Our number one priority is multimodal trip planning, which is what people also offer, but multimodal customer service, which generally nobody offers, because that sounds like a lot of work, and that sounds like a lot of expense. And if you are not tech savvy enough and wealthy enough to just use the app, they're not terribly interested in solving problems. That's just, I'm just being very frank. So the multimodal planning, I like to look at what people have. When I say, well, we only have 2 services that have APIs that we can access, they kind of look at you saying, well, you know, we are the opposite of a big urban area. We are not in their market. We need to develop something, and we would like it to be a template. Ideally, I would like to go into this where it's an open source template that we can create that other small urban rural areas can, communities can use. And so we need to keep it as simple as we can and make it easier for the customer so that on a phone they can push a button and get to who they want to talk to. Just one button, not remember the phone number. Everything needs to devolve around ease of use, because we are at the opposite of ease of use now. We are at the complexity. You need to be comfortable and have the ability and have a smartphone and all that other stuff. And a lot of people cannot do that.
Just one thing, very quickly, because that what you say, if I think from everyone's perspective, most people normally use Google Maps for this kind of planning. Did you ever got any call from Google or from these kind of big aggregators?
All of our transit data and stuff is the GTFS format, and you can use Google Maps to look at what the options are for using transit. It's when you're bringing in these other types of services in a coordinated fashion, that's what's missing. So for example, where are the bike share bikes? Where are the car share cars?
Yes,
not only where are the car share cars, but where are all the available car share cars now? Okay, so it's more of like real-time availability. As you are, let's say, coming in on a 50-kilometer bus ride, and you remember, oh, I need to go and pick this up or do something else or do go some other place, and now how am I going to do that when I arrive in this city at my work location via bus?
Yeah.
Thanks, Dwight. I think we could keep going, and I'm conscious that we're now an hour and 20. I think we might have to do a version 2 of Dwight as well. And I really do appreciate everybody that's hung on, because you have genuinely got a lot of people thinking, and hopefully they will come back to you with some more questions. If I haven't asked a question and you want me to, just quickly PM me to SNOW or drop me an email and I can do so, or just hit Dwight straight through in his direct email. You're going to have to listen to my drum roll again, I'm afraid, because it's stuck on this screen. So just if you've fallen asleep, you're going to wake up again, okay, with the drum roll. Yay, it's done. So next slide. So what's next? Aside from saying another big round of applause to Dwight for today.
Thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure.
Great. I'm sorry we haven't got to France and to all the other, I think Germany's on this call as well. So thank you. Again, we share some of all these practices on the Rural Transport Innovation Group. So please do join us on the LinkedIn group. We're going to keep going with these bite-sized cafes. We've got one more left before we're going to take a bit of a break. So I'm going to hand over to Rob, who's going to tell you about the one in 2 weeks' time on Orkney.
Yeah, I thought, Jenny, it was actually next week, but the 26th, isn't it?
26th.
So that's next week.
Right, next week. This is lockdown. Lockdown's made me lose track of time.
Not a problem. I was beginning to think I was wrong as well. Yes, so next week we're going to focus on Orkney. For those that do not know, Orkney is a set of islands north of Scotland. Just about 8 miles off the north coast of Scotland, between Scotland and the Shetland Islands. And they're an island, they think themselves like an island nation in their own right, but what's unique about them is that the local authority runs the buses, the airport and the ferries, because the Orkney Islands are an archipelago of about 19 different islands. They're not all occupied, but actually there are a lot of them are occupied. So the ferry services and the bus services and the connectivity is very, very important for the island. And so we're just going to hear about how they work, what they do as far as a rural setting, and what some of their aspirations are moving forwards. One thing I'd like to say about Orkney is, and I've been working with them for the last 6 months or so, they're very innovative and they're open for ideas and suggestions to make their transport service, in fact the whole islands, work in a more effective and be more effective in their operations. So we can hear more about Orkney, how they work, how they operate, and how rural they are.
Thank you, Rob. And I hear the wind charm in the background. And for those of you that might want to put the label MaaS on, one could say that because Orkney is its own ecosystem, is an easier place to be able to look at MaaS. July, we're going to have a bit of a pause, okay? Because I know everybody's getting a bit, not necessarily cafeed out, but zoomed out. So we're not going to hold any cafes in July, but we're going to look if there's demand for it into the autumn series, starting in sort of September going through. We've got the convention, which we'll confirm, but I have a suspicion it might be online in a different format, but we'll see. But if you've got suggestions that you want to pull forward, then do let us know. Some of the people have already said, how about talking about smart villages or transport poverty? It's about keeping it real. So if you can contribute to this, please do so. I've got Michael here who's on the call, and I'm going to throw him in the deep end because he and I have been having conversations. You don't need to talk, Michael, you're all right. Having conversations about the North Coast 500 in Scotland and the tourism challenges, because he and his wife actually went round trying to use a bus to do this route. But I'm not going to say any more, but Michael will be in the lineup. So we'll have a bit of a break, and you will definitely see us after June going forward, because it's been really welcomed and the positive feedback we've got has been great. And as always, I can't not say anything about Mamba. I say Mamba, this European project, in every single cafe, but what we're trying to do is organize in September a joint workshop. So if you haven't heard of Mamba before, have a wee Google, but for those of you on the line that are familiar, they're very much about practical rural projects, and the EU projects are coming to an end at the moment. So we're going to do something together probably in September. So watch this space. We're taking the cafe to Mamba, and Mamba's coming to the cafe. So unless anybody else has put anything in the chat, because my chat room's disappeared off my screen at the moment, I can't see it. I want to say a big thanks again to my musketeers behind the scenes who are here today still. Ali had to leave, but Rob Furlong and Alex Reed. and obviously Dwight for all your contributions. I'm not going to hang up just now, so if anybody has a burning question that they want to speak to Dwight, or anybody else here, if you want to do a bit of networking, then feel free to do so. But it's been a pleasure having you all on board. Go and get a drink if you're in Australia, or go back to bed if you're in America, or go for a run and get inspired. Or if you're in the UK, gin o'clock is only about 5 hours away for me. I'm not that I'm counting. But if you want to unmute yourselves and have a chat, then great. Lovely to have you. Thank you.